Okay, welcome to another video. This is Tim with Paul. Sorry it took so long to get a video up. It's been 6 weeks since the last one.
It's been 6 weeks since our last confession for all the Catholics in the crowd.
So this time we decided to do a ranking of the shows we watched growing up and how much they influenced us. Then we have to explain what do we mean by influenced us. Maybe we had different
Yes.
ideas about that, but what came to mind for you when I said shows that influenced us?
I was planning to read that line to you like a straight man, but you've read it to me like a straight man, so I'll read it back to you in a minute. Influence, yeah. I think I sort of instinctively thought that I knew what you meant, or when we start first talked about this. I guess in terms of influence, I mean anyway, what memes we would call them now, although we wouldn't have called them that then at all,
Mm-hmm.
back in the 70s and 80s. What memes, have stuck with me the longest?
Mm-hmm.
I've repeated them to you. I've repeated them in my head.
Yes.
I still use them when I think about things and cultural references and historical moments. They're kind of like indexes of various parts of my life. So in that sense, there's that kind of influence. But then there's
Yeah.
also influence on what I do right now,
Mm-hmm.
and what I do for work, what I do for entertainment. So I guess both of those things are what kind of intertwined with each other in my sense of how
Mm-hmm.
these shows influenced me.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I was thinking too. Both of those things.
Hmm. Yeah, so not just
Because when we're talking, lots of pop culture references come up, especially ones from what we watched as kids.
I don't know if anybody else ever hears or sees that. I can't imagine that our listeners from the to the Bat Polls podcast would ever know that we just bandy about pop culture references all the time. Who da thunk? Anyway.
And what we did, we threw out a bunch of shows that we remembered watching as kids, and we made kind of a cutoff of the summer of '83 because after that I went to college, and then we were, you know, starting to consume different media from each other, and maybe some things you got into a lot more than I did, or I never
Hmm.
even watched, for example, especially since I was
Hmm.
in Japan as of 1989.
Right.
And then yeah, I was listening to different music, watching different TV than you were.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I never watched General Hospital though, even when we were. I think you started watching it in high school, didn't you, or was it not until college?
well, no, I never watched it in high school.
Okay.
I think I first started watching it. Well, I watched it in 1985 in the summer, basically just to see Emma Samms.
That's right. Now this is coming back to me.
Yeah, and I watched it a bit in the fall in college, and then I didn't really watch it again until '87 when I visited a friend who always watched it, and then I really got into it then. And after I came to Japan 2 years later, Mom was taping it for me and sending me the tapes uh, here in Japan. And by the time I quit watching it in 1995, I was a whole year behind on watching the tapes.
Well, yeah, when a show is televised, 5 days a week and it's hour long, even though there are more ads in the daytime programs than there
Mm-hmm.
are during prime time, it takes a long time to get caught up once you get behind.
Well, at the beginning, she was only taping it 3 times a week, and then we upped it to 4 times a week later. But always,
Hmm.
always skipping Tuesday. That reduced it a little bit, but
Right, and daytime soaps are so redundant. There's an awful lot of times when one episode doesn't actually move any of the plots forward at all. It's just a bunch of fade outs on people gasping at each other. How could you have said that? Or what? I didn't know that you had my underwear in your purse. How was I supposed to know that?
although I never understood why that one year they had the big resolution to a storyline on Thanksgiving Day, and we didn't get it taped that day. I think it wasn't even on in our
Oh,
market, so I missed the climax of the whole months long storyline, and then the next day was like they were just saying like, wow, that was really exciting, wasn't it? Like, I don't know, tell me.
Yeah, back then you'd have to wait until the next issue of Soap Opera Digest, hit the stands at the grocery store to
Right.
determine what actually happened.
But I was in Japan, so I didn't even have that available to me.
Yes, there were no Hy-Vees near you in Tokyo. Yeah, well, speaking of influence of the past on the present, if you turned on General Hospital right now, like, well, not that right this second, but Emma Samms actually still appears on that show.
Yeah, a lot of people have, were gone for a long time and came back.
Yeah,
Tristan Rogers has been off and on, and some of the other oldsters.
Right. When Mom was in the hospital having her her shoulder replacement surgery last summer, Dad and I were in the commissary at the hospital, and General Hospital was on. And the only way I knew that, this is I didn't see any bumpers, just ads, was it's like, oh my gosh, it's Emma Samms. She doesn't even look that much older 35 years down the road.
Okay. Anyway, General Hospital isn't even on our list, but...
No, we never talk about mass culture or fling references at each other like chimpanzees.
So, well, there's a monkey coming up too. But anyway.
Oh yes, yes, I know.
So, of the shows that we threw out, there must have been, I didn't count them, at least 20. We actually chose 9 of the same ones, and then we each had one that wasn't on the other's list. And so I ended up with a top 9 of ones that we both kind of voted for. But I wanted to talk first about the ones that only one of us put on the list. So for you, it was Late Night with David Letterman, the NBC David Letterman show.
Right. Yeah, he didn't move over to CBS until what, 91?
93.
Was it that late? Okay.
Yeah. And somehow I know that, even though I was in Japan. But actually, though, I was in America twice that year. I think that's why I know. But yeah, so why did you choose that one? I think you had it number 9 on your list.
Yeah, I think I chose it because even though at first when we were talking about this, I said to you, I think you watched Letterman a lot more religiously than I did. But I have all kinds of memories of like bits on Letterman, like when he dropped New Coke and Classic Coke off the 5-story tower. He'd drive out to New Jersey somewhere, I think, and dump stuff off this completely anonymous 5-story tower. And he dropped both a 6-pack of Classic Coke and a 6-pack of New Coke off the tower, and they're filming from bird's eye view like he used to do on the CBS show when he'd throw stuff off the Ed Sullivan building. And they both fell and they smashed all over the place. And then, there's, typical Letterman, perfectly timed pause. And then he says, yeah, I think the new one is sweeter. Moments like that have stuck with me forever. They still come back to me when I think about, hermits or, people, cloistering themselves off from the world. If that ever comes up in something I'm watching or reading, or if I ever feel like cloistering myself off, I think of, what is his name? Chris.
Chris. Yeah, he had his own show later.
Yes, he's on Schitt's Creek. Anyway, I can't come up with it. There are too many Chris's in the world of comedians.
What was his show called later? Give me a break. No, that wasn't it.
No, and it wasn't just Shoot Me, but it was something like that. Oh, here we are once again, trying to figure out something we can't remember.
Okay, well, I'm Googling. Go ahead. Say what you were going to say.
Anyway, he played the guy who lives under the seats at one point, and he was just this kind of gross vagabond. The moments like that, just impossible to get out of my mind. Oh,
Chris Elliott.
Chris Elliott, yes, that's right. He's Bob Elliott's son from Bob and Ray, the comedy team. But a moment that I remember all the time that seemed like perfectly attuned with our senses of humor, even though maybe we didn't quite know it yet, is the moment when one of his writers, who claimed to be a huge fan of Bill Keane's Family Circus cartoon strip had the signed Bill Keane, Sunday page in front of him and was showing it to Dave, just talking about how amazing it was. And we're thinking, where's this going? And then suddenly shots ring out from the auditorium, and the panel on which he had mounted this Bill Keane Family Circus strip stopped the bullets and saved his life. It's like, that's so random, and yet it's so hilarious. Those jokes out of nowhere is something that has really stuck with me. Is, this is what humor means to me, or it's the funniest thing you could possibly do.
As we were talking before we started recording, a Letterman catchphrase came up. They pelted us with rocks and garbage.
Yes, this was after "Where's the Beef," was it not?
Something like that. Yeah, he had
Wendy's catchphrase was so popular, he decided he was going to start his own.
Yeah, and he had these kids saying like several different possible catchphrases, and I think the audience voted like with applause or something, and that was the winner.
Yeah, and then something like, I can handle the itching, but I hate the swelling. Just the grossest possible stuff. And
one other comes to mind for me, came to mind as you were talking about the others. It was one time in the late 80s, I think. What was it? I think Dave was going to be a human refrigerator magnet.
Yeah.
And, they had a refrigerator there, and he was talking about how like it was a GE refrigerator, and he was always poking fun at them because they were the parent company of NBC at the time. And then like he goes to like try to stick himself to the refrigerator and accidentally pulls the handle off the fridge and says, "Yep, it's a GE, all right." The quality goes in before the name goes on.
Oh yes, he
that
poked
just
fun.
Killed me.
Yeah. Biting the hand that feeds you was something he always did really well. Like, and he had this feud going with Bryant Gumbel at the time too, where he would make fun relentlessly of what he would at least ingest, call Gumbel's pompousness. And so, to kind of deflate him a bit, he showed a sketch that was supposedly being done for a statue of Bryant Gumbel as Neptune that was going to go on top of Rockefeller Center.
Okay.
That was so great. I can still remember what the drawing looked like. At least, it's my recollection of what that drawing looked like. It's Bryant Gumbel with a big smile on his face, going like this with his Neptune crown and rippling muscles, bare chested, all of that. Again, totally random, but so funny. Funny because it's so shocking and so surprising that you never would have thought of it. Okay, so this is probably half of our, video cast that we spent talking about a show that only one of us ranked.
Yeah, I mean, I could have easily included it. After a while, it just kind of got, like, what order should I put these shows in? The one that I included that you didn't was Bullwinkle and Rocky. And I got to thinking, maybe the difference there is that I remember watching it when I was like 4, 5, 6 years old, and you're enough younger that you might not even remember watching it as a kid.
No, not really. I remember liking it and trying to watch it when I was in maybe junior high or high school, because I remembered it being funny, but I didn't remember much about it. And because the same like Jay Ward's animation studio was still doing some animation at that time, like the Captain Crunch commercials on Saturday morning TV. I still had a pretty strong sense of, how the animation felt compared to other animators, other studios' work. So it was still familiar to me, and I've always loved Rocky and Bullwinkle, but I didn't have as deep roots in that cartoon as you did.
But yeah, watching it when I was 5, of course, I didn't really get, the satirical part of it. I got that later. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I think it was on TV somewhere at some point in the 80s that I watched it when I was home, or it might have even been after I graduated from college. That was when I kind of started to appreciate the satirical aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it sort of now, of course, this is after I went to college and kind of after the cutoff, but I think it influenced me doing satirical comics as I've done off and on, mostly off.
Since you were about 10, right? 10 or 11?
Yeah.
When did Not Brand Yek when did Spider Hag begin? Your parody of Spider-Man where Aunt May gets bitten by the spider.
1978. I was in the last part of 7th grade.
Yeah, so you would have been about 13 at the time.
Yeah, 12 still. But my birthday in June, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that goes back a long way, and so yeah, I can see that Bullwinkle, probably had an influence there. Like the Fractured Fairy Tales were things we probably wouldn't have completely gotten because they always had, some more adults, friendly satirical angle to them. Like, they were ironic about the fairy tales that were being retold, but also the bumpers at the ends of, parts of the cartoon where there'd be, some kind of famous cliched phrase that was used as the secondary title of the next episode, the next chunk of Bullwinkle and Rocky. But, no kid would ever get, probably never heard the cliched phrases before.
No.
Like, thanks for the memories would be transformed into something else that was appropriate to what Boris and Natasha were doing, or trying to perpetrate upon Bullwinkle and Rocky at that point.
Yeah. I watched some Bullwinkle today, and yes, this is a VHS tape. My 25-year-old VCR still works perfectly. So
yeah, you just got to add kerosene and pull the ripcord really hard.
Okay, so the next two entries are ones that I think we both somewhat begrudgingly had to acknowledge were influences.
I think that's well expressed.
Number 9, Gilligan's Island. This one showed up in our satirical comics. I used to do Drilligan's Island.
Gilligan's nose was a drill.
Yeah, to make fun of Gilligan's Island.
Yes. There's nothing that you want as a kid. There's nothing you want to make fun of and deride more than something you used to watch less than a year ago, but now you're trying to separate yourself from because it's quote unquote dumb. Like, they're horrible, kind of, semi-pornographic and very sadistic songs about Barney that are based on the I Love You, I Love Me theme that, kids were, I heard kids that I babysat for singing that theme with the terrible lyrics, after they, like a year earlier, they'd been watching Barney like, it was a religion, which it was, I think.
Yeah, maybe so. But also in terms of memes, I mean, here's the monkey, the monkey throwing the exploding plates pops up in our conversations with some regularity, which, by the way, I checked, that's from the next to last episode of the series in 1967. Really? The episode is called Bang, Bang, Bang.
I'm surprised it's not called Ugh. We say bang, bang, bang.
Yeah, which, of course, it starts out that they find this clay-like material and use it for fillings in Gilligan's teeth, and then they making
make plates out of it
and stuff. Yeah, and then
it turns out it's plastic explosive.
Yeah, and then Gilligan's monkey is up on the roof of a hut throwing dishes at the castaways, and they're exploding.
And I quote, hoo, 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 ha, ha, ha. A dramatic pause, throw the plate, boom, pyrotechnics. If one of us does that to the other, if we're talking about God knows what, explosions or something, the other one instantly knows what's going on, even after the first ooh, the first sound effect.
Another classic, Rumus Iglumus. I had to check exactly how to say it because we were saying it wrong before. It's from the season 2 episode in 1966, The Postman Cometh, which I watched today or attempted to, but these used DVDs are kind of scratchy. And I ended up having to watch the last part of it in a poor recreation of the episode on YouTube.
A recreation? Like a fan film of Gilligan's Island?
Yeah.
Oh,
reenactment, and not a very good one.
I thought we had too much time on our hands.
But it's actually a fairly funny episode, I had to say.
Rumus aglumus,
Yeah.
right, is the name of an illness.
Hmm.
That is it a real one,
Well,
or is it one that the professor makes up in order to kind of corral the
actually,
troops
okay.
somehow?
This is why I watched it today, because I needed to refresh my memory on this earth-shaking plot. Um,
Mm,
so Marianne has been sending messages in a bottle to her boyfriend, who's
mm.
back in Kansas. So I'm sure they're going to wash up on the shore in Kansas. Uh, and then
Landlocked state. Excuse me.
Gilligan and the skipper hear on the radio that this guy, it seems to be the same guy with the same name, has married some movie star. And they're worried that Marianne is going to be all upset about it. So um, they're trying to tell her what happened, and they just can't do it because they're afraid she's going to cry and everything. And yeah, so the professor finds her where she's cooking some mushrooms, and he's about to tell her about her boyfriend, and then instead he says, "You need to be careful about these mushrooms; they might be poisonous." So then Gilligan and the skipper and professor are all acting like they're trying to romance Marianne to get her mind off of the boyfriend.
The memories. Marianne, 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 right? This
That's
is what Professor
Professor's
pretends
Cary Grant
his impersonation, right?
Yeah, and Gilligan is Charles Boyer, and uh, Skipper is Matt Dillon. So, but then she has a dream.
Well, like Sheriff Matt Dillon, not Matt Dillon
Yeah,
from The Outsiders.
right. Yeah. So she's
Different
been,
era.
Oh, other important pieces. She's been listening to her soap opera on the radio, Young Dr. Young and Old Dr. Young. So then she has a dream that she's in the hospital,
Right.
and so the other castaways are doctors and nurses, and yeah, the professor doctor in the dream tells her she has rumus aglumus, which comes from eating poison mushrooms, and she's going
Usually
to die.
death comes from,
Yeah.
immediate death comes from eating poison mushrooms,
Yeah.
usually.
So, but then after she wakes up, then she finds out what the problem really was. It wasn't that they were afraid to tell her that she was dying. It was they were afraid to tell her about her boyfriend, who it turns out wasn't actually her boyfriend. She was just saying that because Ginger seems to have so many boyfriends, and she wanted to feel like she had a boyfriend too, or something.
Right. So displacement is 0 at the end of the episode. Who'd have thunk it in a in a 60s sitcom? So Loomis aglumis, which we misheard, we ended up using to describe and deride a character, a villainous character who was basically evil schizophrenic who pretended to be an evangelist in the
Right.
Spider-Man comic strip.
Yeah, in
And
the
his name was
newspaper.
Loomis. Loomis loves you, he would say. And
Right.
Peter Parker's girlfriend was falling for this guy, and so we
Well, we have to say, so that he was a mental patient named Lombard who had plastic surgery, and then he became this Loomis, this cult leader. And so we called that series Loomis a Lombard.
as opposed to Rumus aglumis,
Right.
because we thought it was Loomis aglumis.
Right.
Because we were listening to Gilligan's Island episodes on a speaker that was about this big on a black and white television from the 1960s, I believe. Gilligan's Island. Gilligan's Island is one of those shows that when we were kids, it just was on TV. Right, and you had, if you were lucky, you had 4 choices in the Midwest anyway, of things to watch. There wasn't really much there were translator channels on the UHF band, but there weren't the kind of public access and independently owned channels like in larger markets like New York City or Cincinnati or things like that. So
our cable system, and I guess you could do the same thing if you had a big TV antenna. you could get network affiliates from different markets. Des Moines market and Cedar Rapids Waterloo market. And where we were in Centerville, there was one TV station in our market, the ABC affiliate in Ottumwa. But yeah, I just remembered that there was a period where we were watching Gilligan on 2 different channels every day.
Right. That shows you how desperate we were for entertainment and how little control we had over the entertainment that we were able to get in grade school.
And how much Gilligan was dominating syndicated TV in the afternoon.
Oh, yeah. I'm surprised we couldn't get the Munsters on 2 different channels for a while.
And another one in that same vein of dominating 70s syndicated TV in the afternoon and a begrudging admission to this list, number 8, The Brady Bunch. Oh, my nose.
Repeat that a few thousand times, and then show us the ball hitting the pot with the plant in it, and then doing it backwards in Peter's imagination, his fevered brain, as his guilt, works it out. I'm surprised there wasn't like a picture of Peter Brady, like the picture of Dorian Gray, that would get uglier and uglier as he continued to hold the truth from his mother, so that she would not find out that he had broken the vase. So yeah, huge melodramas and huge not physical comedy, but just like big comedy repercussions made out of everyday familial snags and tiffs and things like that. I think there came a point when we started watching that show derisively, I think, because I remember how much we kind of hated immediately once we started seeing reruns of the first season of the Brady Bunch. Instead of the kids singing the theme, we had those, angelic, not angelic really, just, kind of horrifying sounding studio singers going, the Brady Bunch, the Brady Bunch. And, Carol had her hair piled on top of her head instead of that really spiffy and with it look of the kind of Betty Brant curls that the Betty Brant hair that she wore in the following seasons.
Yeah, well, I'm checking something here. No, okay. The first season, it was sung by the Peppermint Trolley Company.
Wow, I hate them even more now. What a name.
By the way, I found the Oh My Nose episode. It's a season 4 episode, 1973. The title, which of course we never saw on the screen because that was they didn't do that in that series. The title is The Subject Was Noses, which I figured out was a parody of a 60s movie title. The subject was Roses.
Oh, I see.
I'd never heard of that film before, but I've noticed that a lot of TV shows, especially ones where they didn't actually tell you what the title of the episode was, often those episode titles are parodies of movie titles. I noticed it a lot in Laverne and Shirley.
Interesting. Yes, I would think that Bullwinkle's bumpers probably used movie titles as well, or song titles like Some Enchanted Evening and, well-known things like that. Why do you think we watched the Brady Bunch so intensively? Was it, again, just, a matter of, not choosing your dance partner, just happy to be on the ballroom floor?
Well, I think I remember watching it in first run, and when it went off in 74. It was the year I turned 9. And I had enjoyed it when we watched it in first run, although we didn't get to watch it that often because our family had family night on Friday nights. And it was on Friday. So I think at first my thought was I want to catch up and see all the episodes that I never saw. But yeah, and it went into syndication right away in 74, as I recall.
Not surprisingly,
that fall. So yeah, 4th grade year, it was lots of Brady Bunch. But yeah, I think after about a year of it, we started to, our attitude began to change. But there's another episode that we have to mention, and I didn't think to look it up until I just thought of it now. The ever popular episode guest starring Jackie Coogan wearing the neck brace, and then
Yes.
they're in court, and then Dad drops his briefcase on purpose, and Jackie Coogan turns his head, and they say, "Aha, you're faking."
Yes, because I think was it Carol who hit his car, or they
Yeah.
had some kind of just a
Fender bender.
fender bender, yeah. So right, and so he's trying to sue them, and then he proves that he is not harmed at all, or
Oh,
he gives it away.
another meme. Um, the time that the manager of a bicycle shop was played by the same guy who had played Jack Ruby in a movie on TV, and so we dubbed it Jack Ruby's Bike Shop.
And right, and didn't you watch this film about Jack Ruby that
So
Jack Ruby
yeah,
was in at school?
in
But
junior
it was
high,
a made-for-TV
yeah,
movie that you saw at junior high.
the history teacher had a VCR, and this is like 1978, and it's like, wow, you can tape TV shows.
Was it
And
cassette or reel to reel?
it was
Because I
cassette.
remember,
It was cassette.
wow,
It was a VCR, not a VTR.
wow, because I remember watching stuff on VTRs all the way up through my senior year of high school, like old tapes of Shakespeare plays that were stuffed in the attic of Jefferson High School. They
Yeah,
pull
so
down and thread up the reel to reel.
he must have spent a pretty penny on that in 1978. But yeah, he would record history-related TV movies. Although sometimes they weren't very history related. That was where I saw Rocky. So we would have history class for half an hour, and then the last part of the hour we'd watch a little bit more of Rocky.
That's funny. Yeah, maybe it's Italian American history doubleheader, Rocky and The Godfather,
But
right?
there were
History.
also there was one about JFK's assassination. Then there was one about another one that was like so the one that the bike shop owner was in. It was like kind of a what if Jack Ruby hadn't. Let's see. I'm getting them mixed up. There was one. What if Jack Ruby hadn't shot Oswald? And the other one was about Jack. Yeah, focused on Jack Ruby and his, from his point of view, the finding out about the assassination and killing Oswald. That was the one that the bike shop owner guy was in.
Right, right. So same actor playing the bike shop owner and Jack Ruby. And then there was this ad on the radio for Bohemian Savings. Bohemian Savings, Cedar Rapids had a big Czechoslovakian population. And so the Bohemian Savings radio ad went like this. It had a jingle. We want to win you over, da-da-da-da-da, to Bohemian Savings, want to win you over. And the theme of this the bike shop fantasy, and it wasn't a fantasy in Brady Bunch, was that the bike was going to be bought for Peter, I guess, to quote-unquote win him over. And so Tim and I used to walk around singing that. Tim invented this new reworded jingle or re-lyricized jingle. We want to win you over, da, 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 at Jack Ruby's bike shop. Want to win you over.
I vaguely remember that now that you bring it up, but
Oh, good stuff. Tim, I think maybe we better just do 10 through 6 in this episode and save 5 through 1 for the next video.
Time. Right.
This is way too much fun for us. Don't know if you don't know if any viewers are enjoying any of this, but God darn it, it's our video.
Okay, so we'll do 7 and 6, and then we'll put off the top 5 till next time.
Okay.
Hey,
we'll have more material this way.
Okay, so number 7, we are pleased to include ABC's late night comedy show Fridays, which ran from 1980 to 1982.
Now, you ranked this significantly higher than I did, I believe, because I ranked it 10th.
It was number 5 for me.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it came out as 7. Yeah, because this show somehow hooked us in a way that SNL never did.
Yeah, and we watched SNL regularly during this time, but Fridays was an hour-long Friday night live comedy
Well,
show.
I think it
Wasn't it just an hour
It
long?
started out an hour, and then they expanded it to 90 minutes at some point.
Okay, yeah, because I think it was on from 11 to 12 Central Time on ABC
Yeah,
on
because
Friday nights.
Ted Koppel was on at 10:30. Yeah,
Hmm.
and then Friday started at 11, and because I remember, yeah, it did go to 90 minutes later, and it was going to 12:30, and then we watched just the last 30 minutes of SCTV for a
Yes,
period
nah,
there.
yeah, right,
Yeah,
because it started at 11:30 p.m. Central,
hmm
12:30 on the East Coast.
yeah.
Hard to imagine, and then we ended up watching that Linda Ellerby show sometimes, the news show after
Overnight.
SCTV, Overnight. That's what it was called. I was trying
Oh,
to remember this.
yeah.
Um,
More than once, I think I fell asleep during overnight, but
oh, I know, I fell asleep maybe every
or
single
maybe yeah,
time we
you
watched
always
Overnight.
did.
Yep.
But anyway, Fridays. So yeah, there are. I don't know if I can remember them all, but I listed a few things that we well remember. There was a film included one episode called "Enter the Matsoi," a parody of kung fu movies featuring two rabbis who attack people with matzah crackers. Whoosh! Uh,
Yeah,
Bruce
instead of
Mahler
Shuriken. Hmm.
Bruce Mahler as Rabbi Emmanuel Kimmelman, and Larry David, yes, that Larry David,
The
as,
same, one and the same.
as Rabbi Isaiah Feinberg. And it's on YouTube if you want to look it up.
Yeah. Fabulously funny. Watched it after Tim sent me the link last night. It's just as funny as I remember it. Of course, I'm biased because that became a major meme between us. Like everything from just throwing the crackers themselves to the guy, one of the taekwondo or kung fu masters jumps up, and then there's a cut to a shot of just his feet hanging in midair slapping this guy around, and then they keep like multiplying they keep compounding the joke by having the feet coming, having him the feet
Face
pointed
down.
downward, the
Yeah.
toes pointed downward, slapping the guy around, and then I think there's two pairs of feet coming in
Oh,
from
yeah.
each side of
Mm.
the close-up frame, slapping the guy around. Yeah, that show was really funny. It never made sense to us that it didn't seem to be that popular, and none of our friends watched it.
Mm. Yeah,
It was just us.
it got more and more ambitious, I think, as it went. When it began, there was a lot of drug humor and sex humor. And remember the Three Stooges skits where the Stooges were doing drugs or something. But
Yeah.
later on, it got more sophisticated.
Yeah, definitely more political. John Rourke was their
Reagan.
Ronald Reagan impressionist, and their general impressionist as well. And he'd start moving his head, and then he couldn't stop it, and he'd block it off. But they even did a full blown parody of Ken Russell's Altered States, in which they called Altered Statesman, in which the William Hurt character, goes into, tries to evolve himself, or I think it's actually the William Hurt character is actually Ronald Reagan, and he tries to evolve himself, and he ends up devolving into, a guy wearing a gorilla suit and a Nixon mask. So the theme from Altered States is all there, a horror film about a scientist, who, makes the Promethean effort to evolve himself and see if he can evolve the human race or whatever, and then ends up devolving and becoming a monster. Here we've got a pretty sophisticated, if somewhat puerile bit of humor about Nixon being or Reagan just being an avatar for Nixon in some ways.
But today, I watched part of the Moral Majority. What is it? Comedy Variety Hour.
Hmm.
Where Bruce Mahler is Dr. Jerry Farback. And part of what I watched today, so they have a magic act, and they pull out the one black guy in the audience, who of course is Darrow Igus, the one black cast member, and he's looking kind of nervous, and they put him in the cabinet, and
Oh,
close
yeah.
the curtain and spin it around and then open and he's gone, and then they just wheel the card off and Farbeck says, "Don't you wish you could do this trick?"
Oh, yeah, that's a exceptionally brave skewering of televangelism and the moral majority at this point.
Mm,
Yeah, they didn't, to make it clear, Fridays didn't agree with that, and they were
no.
just
Oh no.
totally like satirizing the racism of the Christian right, as they understood it at that point.
Mm,
Yeah, it was brutal, brutal, but
yes.
extremely funny, and probably not something we should have been watching, I suppose. But
Well,
I don't know why. I don't know why, but we were fascinated by satire,
mm,
and we understood it pretty well.
well,
I
yeah.
think.
Going back to our discovery of Not Brand Ec, in the early '70s,
Oh yeah, that was
that
mind blowing.
that really influenced us.
It was like a major awakening. We knew right off the bat, for some reason, that this was not just a comic book. This was not just another superhero comic book. It was something. It was a parody of the very tropes and conventions that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and everybody else at Marvel were using to tell these stories. So clearly they were sitting around making fun of what they were doing seriously, seemingly in their comics already. So they figured, why not make a whole comic out of the derision that we fling at our own work when we're feeling frustrated with doing this for kids or whatever.
But as far as Fridays, you were mentioning, and this was a skit that I think was earlier on in the series, the dancing chickens, where
Oh
Bruce Muller
yeah.
would put these, dressed chickens, chicken carcasses on his hands and put like little tuxedos on them and shoes and have them dance around.
Yeah, these were not just dressed in the sense of the butcher shop dressing them. They were dressed in the sense of like having little rubber shoes and cuffs and dickies with bow ties on them. And Mahler would be making this thing dance around, and he would even like turn his wrists, he'd
Yeah.
flick his wrists so
It
that the
was,
thing would spin around. The chicken would spin around on his wrist, with its little, booties, its little, spats on its legs, at the end of its, broken off feet. And he would play the piano simultaneously with one hand while he was doing this with his other hand. It was astonishing. He was so talented. I mentioned to Tim last night, why was his career on television so short? This was an incredibly, talented and versatile entertainer.
yeah. He did show up once on Seinfeld as a rabbi.
Right, right, which certainly makes sense. Did Larry David ever show up on Seinfeld, which was a show that he created, of course, or co-created?
Yeah, I think in what is it, the second or third season, the season where they are they're trying to make a TV show for NBC. I think he's in that season.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 That would certainly make sense.
Hmm.
Right. Since Larry David based his input into the show was to make Seinfeld's character more like himself. I think
Yeah,
this is
and
the kind of observational humor that he was beginning to do.
and speaking of Seinfeld, we should mention that Michael Richards was also on Fridays.
Yes, there he is on the right, playing some characters that were in some ways not all that different from Kramer, and that
Mm.
they were, just sort of zombified and obsessed with something, like the time that Kramer got obsessed with the Kenny Rogers Roasters sign across the way that was actually like giving him a sunburn because the neon was so bright. Anyway, yes, yes, yeah. Friday's big impression on us. Yeah, so many memes and like the kinds of films that Albert Brooks used to do at the beginning of SNL's history.
Mm.
Little films that were inserted.
Yeah, like
They did a
Thomas
lot of.
Kramer was
Yep, they
on
did a lot of great
Fridays.
stuff there. And
Well,
Rich Hall.
including Thomas Kramer made Enter the Matsoi.
Right, right. And Rich Hall was on the
Yeah,
show initially on Weekend Update with the Hooterville, the news from
yeah.
Hooterville.
You talk about Arnold Ziffel, the pig from Green
Whom
Acres.
we didn't really know
No,
Green
we
Acres
didn't.
at the time, so yeah, Arnold Ziffel on Fridays via Rich Hall was the gateway to Green Acres for us. It was a gateway drug to smoking Green Acres. But he would use, yep, there it is. But he would use little like farm animals.
Arnold.
There's Arnold. He would use little farm animals and little farm people, like from from a railroad set, like a model railroad setup. And he showed us an amusement park once in which he strapped a couple of these little human figures onto an egg beater, and called it the spin and barf. Turned it on, and they're like. Just, again, pretty infantile in some ways, but so funny because they took it so seriously. They would present it with such, gravity that it was always, the camp distance between what was actually going on and how they were presenting it was one of the funniest things about the show.
Yeah, we could talk about Fridays forever. We need to mention one more thing, which was Andy Kaufman's appearances on there, in particular one where he was in a sketch that appeared to break down live on TV. It turned out that it had been prearranged that Andy would go off script partway through, but only a few people knew that was going to happen. And I don't know who knew that, which of the cast members knew. It appears in the show that Andy almost gets in a fist fight with Jack Burns, the co-producer. And then the next week, the other producer, I forget his name now, he goes on and explains that it was set up. And then Andy comes on, he's going to read this apology, but he says he can't. And, he looks really shell-shocked. And
he's not wearing a neck brace, is he?
No.
Okay, I seem to remember at some point he comes on in a neck brace.
But he looks really disheveled. And he says, this has really ruined my career. I can't get onto other TV shows. I might get kicked off of Taxi.
My wife left me.
Yeah, my wife and I are separated because of this. And people in the audience are laughing. And he's saying, why do you find this funny? And so you feel like, well, is he serious? Or is this, the bit about his wife leaving him is just absurd. So
yeah, just a bridge too far. Mm-hmm.
So that's the best clue that it's a joke. But with Andy, you never could be quite sure.
Yeah, and that was his shtick, ultimately. Playing Latka on Taxi, was a great part for him, in part because it fits with his aesthetic of, the things that Latka said didn't immediately seem funny sometimes. It just seemed incredibly naive or just normal until you started thinking about what he was actually saying. So that uncertainty about whether you're watching comedy or not was really, he was more of a performance artist in some ways. And he was really wanted to ride that line between, what's funny and how it becomes funny. So as a performance artist, Fridays turned out to be a really good venue for him. But that may be one of the reasons why the show failed too, because it was willing to be that experimental and give somebody like Kaufman so much time to do that, to experiment with that problem.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's do one more, and then we'll finish out at an hour here, I think. Number 6 is Super Friends, the original version from 1973.
Yes, those episodes that you know what we're talking about if you're anywhere near our ages. Those episodes that were shown over and over and over.
Yeah, for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I think, they just showed those episodes again and again. Those, probably 13 episodes. The only one I remember, and I brought this up before, was the Minnie and Max Mole episode, where they're kind of, they've got this vehicle similar to, well, I don't know if the Mole Man ever had anything like that. The Mole Man type character in The Incredibles had a similar vehicle with kind of a drill on the front. And I don't remember what Minnie and Max Mole were hoping to accomplish.
Probably just taking over the world, right?
But I think, it doesn't really have any memes for us, but I think in general it got us interested in superheroes. 73, this is a year before we started watching Batman, and a year before Spider-Man showed up on the Electric Company. And after this had been on for a year, that in that fateful fall of '74, we got some friends together, and we dressed as the Super Friends for the Pancake Day Kitty Parade in Centerville.
Population 5,000. Remember, I said we didn't have any VHF channels that we could actually pick up, and our cable system, gave us broadcast or gave us networks from other markets, as Tim was talking about before. This was our tiny little town, but we had parents who were willing to, make us superhero suits. Tim and I had our Superman cape for Tim, and my Batman. Well, I had a cowl too.
Yeah, cape and cowl.
The Batman cowl, and we both wore domino masks with them. We had those for ages. Our parents recently moved up to where I live in New Hampshire, but I wonder if those capes are still around somewhere. I would think they must be.
Maybe. Yeah. So, and then of course those became our junior Batman and junior Superman outfits when we became superheroes later. And I think I talked recently about it somewhere, that I had done comics about us as the Dynamic Juniors, like actually fighting crime in Centerville.
Yeah, and we actually traded off a few stories. Like, I think I wrote wrote and drew the concluding story for KYVR magazine, one of the many not real publications that we produced for each other by gluing the backs or gluing the fronts of Dad's leftover typing paper together, so that the typing didn't show, and then we'd draw on the other side. That's how we made our Spider-Man comics, our satirical comics, and this KYVR magazine, which was those were the call letters of our tape radio station that we did when we were pretty young. Yeah. So, and I used to wear that cape when I pretended to be Mr. Anything. Do you remember Mr. Anything? I had yet another superhero. And I would carry around my one of those orange squirt guns that we had. We had these, clear or translucent plastic orange squirt guns. And they probably didn't work anymore, but I would use that as my ray gun or something. I don't even know what Mr. Anything could do. I suppose anything. Right? Those were his powers. Talk about delusions of grandeur. I don't want to choose a superpower. I'm just going to do everything. But I don't really remember much about any particular episode of the Super Friends. I just remember events that were conventional, like going to the Hall of Justice and the kind of high, the extreme long shots, zooming in on the Hall of Justice, which was, I guess, in Metropolis or Gotham City or something.
Who knows? And of course, guest heroes Marvin, Wendy, and Wonder Dog.
Fred Silverman, your stupid, kid and animal sidekicks for every adult hero on Saturday morning TV. Don't you think Robin is enough? Of course, Robin was played by Casey Kasem, who was a pretty prolific voice actor at the time. If you watch Scooby-Doo, you know what we're talking about. Zoinks! Casey Kasem was the voice of Robin, and now we think about that and we're thinking, okay, Batman, here's your long distance dedication. But stuff like that I remember, but not any particular villain or anything. I do remember the art and the animation was kind of cool, and it turns out we found out years later that the Super Friends show was designed. The character models were designed by Alex Toth, who was a fantastic cartoonist, one of my favorites in retrospect, from the late Silver Age. Just incredible. His anatomy was so spectacularly good and dynamic, and his layouts were like Jim Steranko, take a back seat. Toth was doing that kind of completely wacky, far out layout long before Steranko was doing it. So anyway, that's, at least we knew quality when we saw it, even though quality and Super Friends are not usually words that go together well, as Paul McCartney would say. So, yeah, but, definitely it had an influence on our future superhero interests, for sure. No doubt about it.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, the top 5 will be next time in a couple weeks. So thanks for enduring.
I was just going to say that. Same same verb that was on the tip of my tongue.
So see you next time, hopefully.
Yes, if we don't get too many complaints, we'll be back with the other half of the list next time.